everyone, and welcome to Voices of Hope. I'm Ross Wilsey.
And I'm Mike Wade.
Each episode, we sit down to talk about what it means to live well, physically, emotionally, spiritually, and beyond.
We'll look at how wellness shapes us as individuals, families, communities, and even the wider world around us.
Through real stories and honest conversations, we'll explore what hope looks like and how it grows right here in the New River Valley.
Thanks for joining us. This is Voices of Hope.
Dr. Jim Harris is the director of the Interdisciplinary Behavioral Health Center at Marshall University, an assistant professor in the Department of Social Work, and founder of Opportunities Consulting Services. With a background that spans behavioral health, education, and early intervention, Jim has spent his career helping organizations and individuals better understand human behavior and create meaningful change. A TEDx speaker, whose presentation was recognized as an Editor's Choice Talk, Jim has worked with organizations including the Fred Rogers Company, the U.S. Department of Education, and the U.S. Department of Justice.
So Jim, welcome to the Voices of Hope podcast. So glad to have you with us today.
I appreciate you guys having me. Looking forward to the conversation.
Yeah, so we kicked off the episode by giving our listeners a brief introduction to you. But could you tell us a little bit about your background, where you're from, education, family, that kind of thing?
Sure, absolutely. I actually grew up in Proctorville, Ohio, which is just across the river from Huntington, West Virginia, which a lot of people might be familiar with Marshall University, the We Are Marshall movie and such. So I grew up southern part of Ohio, the most southern tip in that area. I'm the youngest of three. I had an older brother and I have an older sister. I have my mom was a public school teacher for 30 plus years at in a local high school, and my dad was a steel worker for a period of time, and then after he was laid off, went into teaching gymnastics, which is a really weird combination.
That is a shift.
Yeah, it's a long story. It's better told in the bar kind of thing. So that's one of those. But yeah, and then I went to school in this local area just outside, then went to Morehead State for my bachelor's degree. Actually, originally I was, obviously to get an education, but also to play football, and went there to play football and blew my knee out when I was a junior and had a little bit of an identity crisis and figured out, hey, I better figure out what I am besides a football player. And one of those events that was a good experience for me, looking back, because it really focused me in on my education and what I want to do. So finished up at Morehead State with a bachelor's in social work, went to the University of Kentucky, earned a master's in social work there. Did some work in the field. I'll talk, field stuff later, but, and then got an ed specialist degree from Marshall University and later got my doctorate from Marshall University with an emphasis in curriculum and instruction. So those are that's kind of how I arrived, at least personally and educationally at where I am today. I've been a lucky guy with the good things that have happened to me and been a lucky guy in some of the not so good things and the experiences or opportunities they've offered me.
Well, I got to ask, what was the position for football that you played?
I was a defensive end. Yeah, I played defensive end. Yeah, I was a little bit undersized, I guess we might say, but Morehead State's what you used to call 1AA, now they call it FCS.
Right.
So, but I loved it. Football taught me a lot about hard work and taught me a lot about perseverance. And but it's one of those things. I tell my son asked me the other day, if you could go back and change it and you wouldn't have blown out your knee, would you change it? And I was like, no, weirdly, because I kind of like where I ended up and without that adversity and without that change and quote unquote identity crisis, I would have never, I don't know if I would have ended up where I am today.
Gotcha.
So Jim, let's dive into some of that professional journey, the field stuff you mentioned. So if you wouldn't mind just walking us through how you got to where you are today.
Sure. My first I tell young people when I talk to them all the time, like you got to get some other jobs early. Like I worked at Subway as a kid. I worked at Cracker Barrel. I worked as a brick and block laborer for a construction company. Those don't go on your resume now, but I think they're formative. So I always, tell kids you got to go do some of those work. But my first work in the field was I worked as what was called a child care worker in a group home, finishing up my bachelor's into my master's. And it was a group home for kids that had involvement with Department of Health and Human Services, usually some sort of status offense or abuse, neglect. So that kind of got me in the field in a very direct way. When I finished my bachelor's, I went to work at an agency called River Valley Child Development and did some work in birth to 3 early intervention. like right out of the gate, which is really important because it kind of gave me that early childhood background, which I think anybody working in the helping professions needs to understand developmental trajectory and developmental pathways. Did some parent education. Weirdly, at 21 years old, I was a parent educator, but I learned how to be humble and how to listen. Also met one of my mentors in that experience, which is named Son Floyd. He's kind of the one that got me into public speaking and training, and just really kind of helped mold my initial thoughts around behavior and behavior support and what that looks like and how to better support people. After that, I went into work in residential treatment for adolescent males, which was a residential treatment facility. Had about 60 young men there between the ages of 12 and 18. All had some sort of criminal health or mental health involvement and criminal justice involvement. So I started out as a partial hospitalization therapist there. That later became an individual therapist, and then later became a clinical director there. I was fortunate to become a clinical director at a young age, but it really pushed me because I knew I was in over my head. One of the important things if you're in over your head is to realize you are in over your head. So I learned a lot and I grew a lot there. That was important for me. That was a good experience. And then I went in to do community mental health. I was a clinical director for a community mental health agency and met another one of my mentors in that. I kind of knew him personally beforehand, but worked professionally with him. His name is Brett Looney. He worked at the juvenile detention facility in the area, and we helped. And at the agency I worked at, we did some of the early school-based mental health programs in the area, which was a really cool thing to be a part of starting up. Went from community mental health into taught a little bit at West Virginia University in their master's of social work program, and then transitioned into Oasis Behavioral Health, which was a private practice. Huge experience for me to learn more about the business side of mental health, and also my four big mentors that the two mentors I met there were Sean Cade, who was a clinician there, and Bill Webb, who was the owner of the practice, that taught me that you can have a heart and know how to run a business at the same time, that you don't have to pick. So he also, motivational interviewing is a foundational theory and stage of change foundational for me. So I worked at Oasis as well. And I worked for I had my own company. I started in 08, Opportunities Consulting, and did that on my own for a number of years. But my boys were young and I was on the road a lot. And so I wanted to get off the road. And so I went to work at Marshall University in the Autism Training Center there, the West Virginia Autism Training Center. I always kept my business going at the same time, doing a lot of speaking, consulting, things like that, which I continue to do now. Went to the ATC first as the positive behavior support state coordinator for schools, so helping schools install better behavior support systems, and then later became the associate director there. Okay. And then now I was there for like 10 years, and now I'm at the Marshall University's Department of Social Work as an assistant professor and the director of the Behavioral Health Center. So a lot of stops along the way. Got the gray, my beard to prove it. It's hard for me to imagine that I'm in the phase of my career that I'm in, because I still feel like I'm young and just getting started. So
Right.
Well, it's great that you can say that.
Yeah, I tell you, it's strange. It is strange especially when I was doing a lecture the other day for I teach in the master's program, and I was teaching for one of our classes, and I said something about getting my master's in 01. And one of my students go, that's the year I was born. And I was like, yeah, okay. Probably something you could have kept to yourself, but yeah.
So a few weeks ago, I'm going down a rabbit hole looking at different videos of keynote speakers, and I come across this video, this TED Talk presentation on YouTube, and I found you. And the subject of the talk that you gave in that video was something that I think resonates with a lot of our listeners. What's wrong with kids these days? And not to steal the thunder of that presentation, because I really do think everybody should watch that. But let's talk about it. What's the essence of the message that you're trying to get across there?
Well, I think obviously the title's a little bit provocative to try to draw people in, but it really is. I feel strongly that the questions you ask kind of point you toward better answers. And I think when people's mindset is what's wrong with kids these days, I think it kind of leads them down a path that I don't know is the best as far as supporting young people. So what I kind of pose in that is maybe there's a better question, which is, what do kids need these days? And I think that mindset for me creates better, I was going to talk about like nose to nose versus hip to hip. Because nose to nose, it's like it's us versus kids, which I've found not to be very productive, or hip to hip, which is about shared perspective. I always want to give a caveat with that, though. What I'm not saying is that people should be friends with kids necessarily,
Right.
because kids, they need to be leaders, mentors, thought partners, like with a shared perspective, helping young people get ready for a world that, quite frankly, none of us are 100% sure what it's going to look like, but kind of building some of those skills in those. So I think it's about asking that better question about what do kids need these days. So that's what I really hope people can take from the talk is, and I was working on it. We did a discussion guide for it and like use that as like an opportunity to, as adults, to like get below the veneer of like, these kids are just TikTok addicted and lazy and all that. And it's like, let's really dig into that a little further. And what you'll find is kids are growing up in a complicated society and they need really thoughtful, supportive people, asking better questions and helping prepare them for the world.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to me, it shouldn't be at least about assigning blame for all the things that are happening, TikTok, phone addictions and things like that. It shouldn't be about who's at fault here, but really how can we address that in an effective way?
Like now what? Yeah.
Right.
Like now what?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think the thing that I notice when I talk to people about kids or give lectures about kids is they tend to have like a voice of contempt sometimes. And like contempt, John Gottman, who I believe is one of the best relationship researchers in the world, he always showed or talked about how contempt is the number one predictor of divorce, because it's about talking down to the other person. It's more than criticism. It's talking down to the other person. And if that's the number one predictor of divorce, and contempt has a tone, like we know that tone, like we've heard the difference between like, giving someone feedback and putting someone down while you're pointing something out. I just think that's one of those things that if people are approaching young people with contempt, I can't imagine that creates an environment where young people want to collaborate or want to have a relationship. So I think that I'm really trying to get people out of that contemptuous mindset and more into that curious mindset.
Yeah, that's great. Can you speak to some of the more common challenges that children and teens are faced with? And do you feel that they're worse or more harmful than maybe what the three of us in this interview had to navigate when we were young?
Yeah, it's one of those things where I feel pretty, people, I'm entitled, I guess, my opinions, but not my own facts. But I definitely think that it's harder now. And the way that I kind of have kind of challenged people to think about that, and it tends to bring the point home, is if you have a teenager right now, which I have two, I have Jake and Cody. I have an 18-year-old and I have a 15-year-old. Jake's a freshman at Ohio University and majoring in mechanical engineering and ROTC Air Force. And
Nice.
Cody is a sophomore who is just an awesome kid, and he's doing robotics and football and all this stuff. So
Cool.
That's great.
I got some really, really, really cool kids. But some of the things when I look at what things we can do to support kids is I wouldn't trade, but it starts with I wouldn't trade places with them.
Right.
Like
Yeah.
if you look at your teenagers, like would you trade places with a teenager now? And if we really, if we wouldn't trade places with them, I think that says something about that we believe they had it harder than we had it, at least socially. I think that's a very fair statement. And I think the data would actually support such a statement. So I think the first thing starts with us having an appreciation for the challenge of being a young person today. What those challenges are, I would say, obviously the big one we talk a lot about is technology. I think the problem with technology is I think people almost give it kind of like the scary monster mentality as opposed to kind of pulling it apart and like looking at what exactly does technology do to impact the development of young people. I think the Jonathan Haidt's book, The Anxious Generation, I think is probably one of the most important books out right now that helps us dig into that. Also, Anna Lemke's book, Dopamine Nation, is another one that I think the combination of those two kind of shows how we're talking neurology, biology. We're not talking will and just a bunch of will stuff. So I think the big thing is technology. First of all, the what we call experiential deprivation, which it just kind of gets in the way of kids having essential experiences. While you're on your phone, regardless of what you're doing on your phone in your room, you're not interacting, you're not playing. While a 4-year-old's on an iPad for 3 hours a day, they're not climbing, jumping, playing in dirt, socializing, making eye contact, learning about social communication, things like that. So the first thing in understanding technology is understanding that it's experiential deprivation is a key to understand what it's doing. And the second layer is what is the actual media that they're interacting with doing to them psychologically. Things like image-based social media, Snapchat, Instagram, pornography, how it's affecting the dopamine systems of kids, especially adolescent males. So those are things too. I think and also too, thinking about experiential deprivation, this generation experienced COVID and
Yeah.
not to go too far down that road, but they missed out on experiences. And when you miss
Yeah.
out on experiences, it creates a developmental delay, not in the sense of like a neurological, disorder, but a delay in experiences, or absence of experiences creates a delay in development. So I
Right.
think COVID did that. Technology's doing that. And also kids that have high stress and trauma, we know that also impacts them as well. So those are kind of the big four that I talk about that we see, that are affecting kids, that have affected how kids are developing and growing.
Yeah, this is sort of an aside, but I just finished reading a book about the shuttle program, and just got my headspace to thinking about, man, I remember when I was a kid, I wanted to be an astronaut, and then later I wanted to be a fighter pilot, and never did any of that. But I had those dreams, and I'm like, man, I just don't know if my kids have that sense of wonder. They do about some things, but just have that kind of room to marinate on some of those dreams, because of some of the distractions that are in their life. So,
And even like the idea of like a kid wanting to be an influencer, there's nothing. I'm not trying to say that we, should smash dreams one by one after another. But what I do think is important is looking at careers like influencer is different because it's more about notoriety as opposed to value. So looking at some of the things that draw kids in now, that they view as socially desirable, some of those things don't have much substance to them. Or they're not about value. They're not about adventure or exploration, like an astronaut or a fighter pilot, or even a counselor or a therapist, so I think really, I think having young people, seeing value in contribution, seeing value in challenge, and, monetary things are important. Don't get me wrong, but we know, that there's lots of really rich, sad people, that chase money or whatever it might be, or so I think there's a real conversation to have with young people there. I'm having it all the time with my 15-year-old right now. We're talking all the time. He's like, this one makes a lot. I'm like, buddy, do something that you love. Do something that you love. Do something that you like. I listen to podcasts, I watch videos, I read, because I am just absolutely obsessed with what I do. I love it. I would do it for free.
yeah.
There's just so many opportunities, or so many things where kids just need more conversations about exploring things. Just something to think about.
Yeah. Well, you mentioned approaching young people with a different tone and not being as quick to point the finger, if you will. But beyond that, how do we, caring adults and grown-ups of the world, make things better for our young people?
Yeah. Well, I tell you, the thing that keeps me focused, which allows for variance in different temperaments and things, is, and I talk about this, I think, in the TED Talk, is the acceptance and growth continuum. I think that's important because acceptance is about understanding unique qualities and differences that kids have, like, their age, their life experiences, neurodevelopmental issues they might have, things like that. And then, so that's like acceptance, which is like better understanding a kid's life and experiences. And on the other side of the continuum is like growth, which is about pushing kids to be the best version of themselves. So I think as parents, helping professionals, teachers, whoever it may be, is kind of keeping in mind the need for us to better understand kids, and then also have good strategies and skills to help kids develop and improve. Because too much of one or the other is actually a problem. If all you do is accept, which is like, you can't help it, you have this diagnosis, no one should challenge you, you actually weaken kids. You make them less than what they could be. And then if all you do is push without any sense of their background, their differences, and so on and so forth, you can break the kid. So I think there's this thing that we got to keep in mind is the balancing. And, I've got 2 boys, Jake and Cody, and I even have to parent them differently based on their temperament, based on their interest
yeah.
areas, based on their ability to deal with discomfort, and things like that. And clinically, I find that to be the case. And I do a lot of stuff in schools where I do consultation for schools for kids with challenging behavior. And that's always something we're trying to figure out is where's the acceptance elements here and where are the growth elements here, that we got to take into consideration. So that's probably my big picture side of it. The other thing I tell people, especially with teenagers, and this goes, Angela Duckworth's book, Grit, is really a good book, but is help kids find their people or find their thing. So, find your people, help them get a support network or find their thing, which is things that they want to work hard at. I think it's one of the things that now, one thing I think is important to mention, some kids are going to struggle more with finding their people because maybe they have some social differences, maybe they have autism, maybe they have, so they might need a little extra support there. And some kids might struggle to find their thing, which is the importance of exploration, exposing kids to lots of stuff, especially in early elementary and middle school, which is why I tell people to be very cautious with early specialization. I see a lot with sports, but I also see it academically too. A kid shows a little bit of promise in an area and suddenly parents like,
Fixate.
Zero in.
yeah. So I think what that does is, and Duckworth's research talks about this, is the early stages of the development of grit is exploration, and early specialization cuts that short. And it can build kids to have a little bit of a paper personality, and they haven't explored a lot of stuff, and then they burn out. They don't know who they are. So I think helping, if helping kids find their people or find their thing early is important. And if they can't, that adults need to step in and support those kids, because some kids just late bloomers. It may be college before they figure some of that stuff out.
Yeah.
So they may just have to survive high school. Like I've worked with kids that just need to survive high school. It's not going to be their thing. It's going to be, how can we get them out of there with as few bumps and bruises as possible? And then they can go to college or go to their trade or whatever it might be. So that's some things I think about.
Yeah, that's great. Thanks, Jim.
So you've mentioned a lot of things already in this interview that point to, you have really enjoyed some success and achievement. It sounds like you're happy with what you're doing, and that, to me, that's success. So were there aspects of your own upbringing that you believe helped set you up for that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my mom, who, like I said, was a school teacher for 30 some years, but also has a master's degree in counseling, has taken on multiple entrepreneurial experiences. She's just an impressive human being. And so being around an impressive human being, especially early in your life, is huge. Not only did I get to see or hear and have conversations where she challenged me to think more deeply and more compassionately for people, she modeled that in how she was a teacher and how she took care of, as she was a coach as well. I remember I was kind of, I don't know if she doesn't remember this, I don't think, but we were riding in the car and I just remember I was like, I was young. This is when Bo Jackson was big. You guys remember when Bo Jackson was huge?
Yeah.
And I told Mom, I'm like, I'm going to play for the Oakland Raiders, or the Los Angeles Raiders at that time. I'm going to play for the LA Raiders. I'm going to be a lawyer and I'm going to drive a Stingray Corvette. And she was like, that sounds great. She goes, that sounds great. Just start asking me questions. It was curious with me, and just developed a sense in me that was really important, that like, hey, you can do these things. And she taught me how to be a better thinker. My dad was someone who was just, I always tell this to parents all the time, don't focus on being perfect, stay present, because that's my dad was present. My dad wasn't perfect, nor am I. And, but I tell you what, my dad he was there. Even after my parents got divorced, he was a continued presence in my life. Always had my back and always was interested in what I was doing, even if he didn't understand it. My dad graduated from high school, went right into the steel mill. So there was things I was doing that he didn't understand because it was part of just my academic life. So having somebody in your corner like that was important for me. And of course, tough things that happened. I had a lot of learning problems as a little kid. I had a lot of reading problems. I still have reading issues today. Those pushed me to develop other skills that now I make a living off of, whether it's for my social communication skills, things like that. The ability to verbal reasoning, because I couldn't read very well. So I was kind of drowning academically in that way. And then, I mentioned the injury that I had was pretty formative for me. So those were some of those things that I was very lucky. I had, a great sister who's brilliant. And she always challenged me to think more broadly about people. She was somebody who was, I don't know, I wouldn't say anti-establishment, but she was into like alternative things. And that always gave me a real understanding of, there's all kinds of ways that people can exist. And my brother was a real hard worker and, was a constant support for me. Did a lot of fatherly kind of things for me about finances and things like that. So I'm a lucky dude when it came to
Yeah,
those
sounds like
kind
it.
of experiences. Yeah.
Yeah,
That's awesome.
for sure. Well, we are all three very fortunate to be fathers, and I know we learn things about ourselves along the way. But what's one thing that being a father has taught you about yourself, Jim?
Humility would be the answer. I think, I've studied this stuff my whole life. I mean, like I said, I've been enthralled by psychology, human behavior, my whole life. I've just really been interested in it. And you think you have some things figured out, and then a kid shows up, and man, do your flaws start to come to the top, right? It's humility. I mean, I'm super, super lucky that my boys, like I have like pinch myself. I'm lucky of Jake and Cody, and they're both awesome in their own way, which also makes me a better father because they pull different parts of me out to make, but at the same time, I tell you, you guys know this as dads, it's like, if you have any insecurities or any weaknesses or things like that, you really think about them because you want to be the best version of yourself for your kids and you fall short, sometimes. And, I'd like to think I win more than I lose, but I definitely know there's, it gives me compassion for other parents. And, so humility's a big, big thing for me. And my wife, Trisha, she's the principal of our local elementary, and she's our relationship, and we balance each other out very, very nicely. And so, having her to kind of fill where my weaknesses are has been instrumental for me as a father. To have a mother that balances me out has given my boys a real shot.
That's awesome.
Yeah. As you were starting to answer that question, I was going to say, for me, it's probably that I didn't have as much patience as I thought I did. But then I realized that's kind of a humility thing because I would always talk about, I'm such a patient guy, and then I had kids. And so,
yeah, it's so different. Like, and even your patience with other people's kids versus your own kids,
right.
It's a different thing.
Yeah.
It'll bring it out of you. I tell you, it's the weird thing, and this sounds like an old man kind of thing, is also it brings your mortality to front and center, especially as my kids have gotten older. Like Jake, when he went away to college, like you have these milestones and you're like, I can't be old enough to have a kid in college.
Right.
Or, Trish and I, Cody's a sophomore, and, once he graduates, it's just going to be us, so I always say, if you're going to have an empty nest, you better like the other bird. So,
Very well said. Yeah. Very well said. Yeah. Yeah.
So, Jeb, I know it's probably not that easy to take care of our kids or to be a parent if we're not taking care of ourselves. So how do you maintain your own personal wellness?
Man, it's a balancing act all the time. I mean, I have my times when I'm doing a great job with it, and I have times when I'm struggling. I have to move. Lifting weights has always been something that's been a part of my that helps me stay balanced. So I lift about 3-4 days a week. I do well when I'm moving. When I'm eating well, I'm at my best, and when I'm not, I'm not. So I find, if I take care of my body first, it sets my mind up for a good spot. So I do really well with routine. So that's a big thing for me. Like when I have good routine, when I have good physical routine, good nutritional routine, that's kind of the foundation for good psychological functioning. I have to be challenged. I'm somebody that's something that helps me. I have to be curious about what I'm doing. I have to be challenged in my work. And also, like just this past weekend, Jake was in town from college, and it's good for me, and my family holds me to this more than I'm the one. I'm just being honest. They're the ones that push me, like, hey, we're watching the movie tonight. Like, come on, let's go. Or we're going to play games tonight. Let's go. Because I can occupy myself with things that I think are important at the time, but I'm just really thankful that I've got a wife and boys that really value us and it recharges my batteries to spend time with my family as well. And also go see my mom, and, spending time with her is important. My dad's since passed, but spending time with my mom is something that, is really powerful for me too. I've noticed, even especially, after my dad passed away and things like that, that's something that I'm like, man, you go soak that stuff in,
Yeah.
Absolutely. Well, you are a guest on the Voices of Hope podcast. So, I mean, we couldn't let you go without asking you what the word hope means to you.
Yeah. I think if I'd really this is one of my big things psychologically, it's the belief that our behavior matters. I think, I've heard that. I heard that somewhere years ago, and I don't know exactly, but I think that the belief that your behavior matters at least gives us a sense of hope that there's things we can do to improve our outcomes. I think, I always am looking for, we can't change everything, and there's some things that happen. Bad things happen to good people, and it's not their fault. But I always try to find, and when I'm at my best, I'm doing a good job finding the areas where I'm controlling the controllables. I'm doing a good job of seeing where my behavior can improve things. And I think probably one of the most damaging places a person could be is in like a learned helplessness mindset, which is where you just don't believe your behavior matters anymore and you're
Right.
hopeless.
Yeah.
And so I think for me, hope is the belief that there's something I can do, something we can do that will improve things in some way. Yeah.
I like it.
It's a great answer. It's unique. I've not heard anybody say that, so I like it.
Keeps me sane sometimes.
Yeah. So before we let you go, any final words of wisdom you want to share with our listeners, Jim?
Well, it's funny when I think of words of wisdom, people usually have like great quotes and all that kind of stuff. If you ever watched the Ted Lasso series, have you guys ever watched the Ted Lasso series?
I love it.
Yeah, it's fantastic. And it's like he does the whole dark scene where he uses the Walt Whitman quote, which is "Be curious, not judgmental."
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
And what's funny about it is, that was actually a quote was going to go in the TED Talk, but come to find out that Walt Whitman, they can't say for sure he said that. And anything that goes into TED Talks get like vetted like by every angle and all that. So I had to be cut out. So it turns out that my favorite quote is not a Walt Whitman quote, and it's not really a Ted Lasso quote, but it's one of my favorites, which is "Be curious, not judgmental." And I find that when I'm at my best is when I'm in a curious mindset, when I'm curious about, what makes things work, what makes people tick, what can I do to support them, what do kids need these days, those kinds of things. And when I'm at my worst is when I'm judgmental, I'm locked into an idea, I'm locked into a concept, I'm locked into an opinion. So, that's what I'm trying to do more of right now is I'm trying to stay curious. And I'm trying to, when I do lectures and do presentations, I want people to understand that I'm coming from a place of curiosity, not a place of certainty. I just hope people can kind of be on a curiosity kind of journey with me. And I think if we bring that to pretty much any situation, I think it has a more humanistic kind of approach. So that's, if I had words of wisdom, I would steal them from whoever said that at some point, which clearly is not Whitman or Ted Lasso or me. So there you go.
Right. Well, regardless of the source, they're wonderful words, and more people should take heed to those. So
yeah. It's been, I mean, I tell you, I appreciate, like I said, I can't believe I get to do what I get to do. I mean, not that I don't get tired like anybody else, but I really am grateful that I've had the opportunity to work in the helping professions, to help people in a variety of different ways, and to be challenged in the ways. And I'm looking forward to the things I'll do next. Who knows what those? I have some ideas, but I'm excited still about things work undone yet.
Well, we are excited to learn what those might be, and are sincerely grateful for all that you do and for your time today. And it's been a real pleasure talking to you, Jim.
Yes. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys having me.
Thanks for listening to Voices of Hope.
If you enjoyed today's conversation, we'd love for you to rate and review the podcast and help us spread the word.
Voices of Hope is a production of New River Valley Community Services.
To learn more or listen to past episodes, visit nrvcs.org/podcast.
And remember, hope grows when we share it.
So keep the conversation going, and we'll talk to you next time on Voices of Hope.